recording? Thank you. Perfect. Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We have been looking at sexuality and sexual health in adult care. And the aim of the unit is to provide all learners and students the knowledge and understanding in relation to sexual health and sexuality of adults who are in care. Today we'll be focusing on an aspect of sexual health of adults, and we'll conclude with how to promote sexual health and sexuality, as well as local and national interventions in relation to the promotion of sexuality and sexual health. We have a lot of things to cover, but the time will not permit us. And so there are other aspects. I'll give you all the resources, but there are other aspects I would require you to read in order to cover the rest of the areas that we need to cover in order to be able to answer all the questions. Now, these are the questions for this unit. They are very simple questions, but you would need to read to be able to use the material to answer the questions. The first question is define the terminologies sexuality and sexual health. So you would need to define what sexuality means and what sexual health means. And please, you would need to use the World Health Organization definition, which we looked at on Monday. And can I ask everyone to mute? And when you are ready to contribute, then you can unmute. Thank you so very much. You are wonderful people. Right. So we're saying that we need to use the World Health Organization definition. Second question is describe sexual development milestone throughout the lifespan. So when we say throughout the lifespan, we are looking at from birth to death. Or in other words, from birth to very old age leading to death. What are the sexual developments? For example, we're going to look at part of that from birth to 3 years and from 3 years to 4, 5, 6, 7, like that. What are the sexual developments? We'll look at that today. We looked at part of this last week. I think much of it explain how factors impact or affect or influence sexuality across the lifespan, and how the factors also impact, affect, or influence sexual health across lifespan. We looked a lot at this last week in relation to men and women as well, and how diseases and different things also affect the sexuality and sexual health of adults. Today, we're going to be looking more at some of the approaches. When we talk about approaches, we are talking about what are the methods and what are the ways of promoting sexual health. We know some of them already. The use of contraceptives through education, use of social media to give education, including sexuality and sexual health issues in the school curriculum, whereby children from primary school are being taught what sexuality and sexual health is. So that question is very, very simple. It says discuss approaches that are used to promote sexual health. We'll talk about some of that, and I'll give you a case study that you can use. The next question is analyze. The key word you have to always remember is the command verb. For example, 1.1, it says define. 1.2 says describe. 1.3 says explain. 2.1 it says discuss. But 2.2 it says analyze. So you're going to do a little more beyond just discussing. You're going to bring a lot of analysis and a little bit of synthesis of ideas. And what are we supposed to analyze? The national interventions and the local interventions to promote sexual health. What do we mean by national intervention or local intervention? what are the national strategies nationally that are used to promote sexual health? Or what are the local strategies that are used to promote sexual health? Basically, we are asking, are there any government regulations, government strategies and policies and initiatives that are put in place to give awareness and education about sexuality and sexual health? Yes, there are a lot of them. And the last thing we'll be looking at today, and I would require you to do more reading on, is the last question: evaluate specialist services and agencies for the support of sexuality and sexual health. Now, when we talk about specialist services, we are talking about, are there any special avenues, initiatives, and opportunities to support people? For example, people who want to control their birth in terms of birth of children. Are there any birth control measures, and where can they be found? And people who want to avoid sexually transmitted diseases, are there any specialist services for them? How can they access them? Basically, that is what that last question is asking: specialist services and agencies in relation to supporting sexuality and sexual health. So we're going to continue. We're going to go straight. Much of this we did last week, but because of time, again, today's session is 1 hour. I'm going to go straight into, these are some of the things we ended here last. I think we ended here last week. I think we're talking about depression and sexual health, how depression affects sexual health. We talk about diabetes and sexual health, how diabetes affects. So people who have diabetes or who are diabetic, how does that affect their sexuality and sexual health? We talk about heart disease in male and in female, and how that affects their sexual health. But I would need you to read more of this. Then we have female reproductive system cancer and sexual health. So when we're talking about reproductive system, we're talking about breast for women. It's a reproductive, organ. So if a woman is affected, sadly, by breast cancer, and how does that affect their sexual health and the expression of their sexuality? I think Nina was giving us some examples, not particularly related to this, but other areas of sexuality, a woman's sexuality, how that affects. So then I will need you to read on this as well. Prostate cancer and sexual health. This has to do with men. Then HIV and older adults, how that also affects their sexual health. Urinary incontinence and sexual health. So if a person has difficulty in controlling the function of urine or urinating, they can't control, that aspect of their lives. How does that affect their sexual health? Please read on it. It's simple, all the information out there for you. We have other medical conditions and how those affect the sexual health of people, like stroke, Parkinson's disease, and others. Then we have cognitive impairment and how that affects the sexual health of individuals, particularly we're talking about adults. Then sexual behaviors that are common to cognitively impaired older adults. So older adults who have cognitive impairment, how does it affect their sexuality and the sexual health? Some of the behaviors that are associated with these, they easily begin to grab people and grope people. They like touching the genitals, they make sexual remarks, and they propose easily and openly. Now, these things are things that affect their behavior. It's not who they are, it is because of the condition, the cognitive issues that they have. They use a lot of obscene language, they masturbate in public areas, they become aggressive and easily irritated. These are part of their condition now. And as healthcare professionals, you need to understand that some of the people who behave this way, you have to find out what are the underlying factors for their behavior. You don't easily jump into conclusion and take some actions on them. It could aggravate their behavior and emotions and affect their health. So it's important that at the point of assessment, these things are looked at and such people are supported accordingly. We're missing Richard and Flora on this call, on this session. I hope they are okay. Then we have environmental barriers and how those also affect, adults. So the absence of, sometimes the absence of the male partner, or in the life of a female elderly adult, for various reasons. Maybe the person is dead, or maybe the person is just away, not where they are. There was a situation where I met a man in a hospital some time ago. I went to work and I visited this elderly man. He was in a hospital somewhere and the wife was in a care home somewhere. And so health issues or different issues can also impact. These are related to environmental, factors, or some of them are in different care facilities. Then effects of medication and treatment on sexual health. So there are times that people are going through health challenges and they are receiving one medical treatment or the other. And sometimes the treatment may have adverse effects on their ability to perform sexually or to respond to their partners, or even to make time for, the fulfillment of such desires in their partners. So there are other things that relate to it. There's a study on it. I will be happy if you read more on that. So we said that the health assessment, sexual health assessment must be done. That's the first step of getting to know and also developing a plan to support the sexuality and sexual health of older adults who go into care. Then there are some things that we can do to help and support also from the onset of assessment. We call it opening the door, sexual health history questionnaires that could be explored with the elderly people as they come into care. I will need you to read some of these, but today I'm going straight into what we want to talk about. These are some of the management of sexual health needs related strategies. Then health promotion, how to promote sexual health. More of that there. How to compensate. This is important. Compensate for disease and normal aging changes. These are some of the things that are proposed to help people cope. Okay, the first one is going to options for normal aging changes to erectile function. Vacuum pumps. Some are strategies and facilities and resources available. Injection therapy, that's also there to support people. Implants, which some people opt for. Talk therapy, like what Nina was sharing with us the other day in terms of spiritual appeal, that is related to talk therapy. Then we have oral erectile agents. So these are some of the, support available for people who opt for those. Other things there that you can think about. What we want to talk about today basically is this. Sexual development milestone. Sexual development milestone throughout the lifespan. So how we develop throughout our lifespan from birth to old age till death. What are the changes that happen in our bodies in relation to sexuality and our sexual health? I'm going to be reading very quickly through this and explain where I need to explain, but much of it is self-explanatory. I took time to prepare this so that you could easily understand. Let's look at the introduction. Each person, each individual, person's understanding and definition of their own experience with sexuality is very unique. So the way one person experiences sexuality may be different from the way another person experiences sexuality. And again, particularly, it differs from males to female, more particularly. However, generally, it differs from person to person because we are all differently made up. And the way we feel in our bodies, the way we think, and the way we look at things, the perspective that we have on life is different from person to person. So sexuality is often defined as the way in which a person expresses, as an individual expresses themselves as sexual beings. We are all sexual beings. We are human beings, we are spirit beings, and we are sexual beings living in a body. It is essential to know that the definition of sexuality can be very complex, and it is unique for every individual person, and involves more than just the sexual activity that people involve in. For there are people who don't involve in sexual activity, but they express their sexuality in different ways. And I know that can be surprising for some people. For example, some people's sexual expression, again, does not involve a sexual activity. So a sexual activity may be something that has to do with one person and another person of the opposite sex. And now in the kind of environment we live in, of same sex, and it also involves someone having something to do not only with another person, but with their own individual self in relation to their sexuality. So let's look at a person's definition of sexuality. So these are some of the ways people define their sexuality. All right. So our sexuality has to do with our gender identity and how the kind of orientation we have. The orientation may be that somebody is attracted to, somebody is a male, is attracted to a female. That is more generally what it's supposed to be. Or someone is a female, is attracted to a male in terms of sexuality. But now, in the kind of environment we live in, there are people who are males and they feel oriented to a male. And there are people who are female and they say they feel oriented to a female. So we call it sexual orientation, right? In the name of equality. But generally, it is male and female orientations. So other people explain their definition of sexuality as having a feeling of attraction, like I was explaining, towards a person of another sex or gender. It is also the way in which people may, or individuals may choose to be intimate with others. That is how other people also explain their sexuality. And again, other people explain their sexuality as their personal body image. On Monday, we're talking much more about body image, and Nina was giving some examples there. So some people's body image is a huge thing when it comes to their definition of sexuality. It means a lot to them. And again, that is why a lot of people spend money in that area, in that aspect of their lives. Then we also have our values, which include our personal, our family, our cultural, our spiritual, and our societal, influences that affect our behavior. So how our personality affects our behavior in relation to our sexuality, how our family, our culture, our spirituality, and society as a whole affects or influence our behavior, the way we behave in relation to our sexuality. These things define what sexuality means to one person or the other. Any question before we proceed? All right, if there is no question, we'll proceed. So this is sexuality milestone throughout the lifespan. So you see that we have early childhood sexuality. So from birth to 3 years, what happens in our body? What happens to us in relation to sexuality? At this age, a person begins to learn about love and trust through touching and holding. Because mom, dad, brothers and sisters, if there are some siblings, begin to carry the child. And The child feeds with mom in terms of is breastfed, is a way of developing the bonding, and there is also touching over there and holding over there. So from that age, we don't look at it more consciously, but then sexuality is explored and it's developed along those lines. Then as babies, the babies would have to suck the breast for breast milk, and it is a means of oral satisfaction, both for the child and also for the child basically who is feeding from mom. Then we have spontaneous reflective responses as children from birth to between the birth and the age of 3 years. They happen automatically. They don't happen very consciously, but they are spontaneous. So there are erections and there are vaginal lubrications in those age groups. You don't take note of them very much because they are not very conscious, but they happen. And there is a gender identity that begins to develop. So as the child grows from, 1, 2, 3, from birth and that range, they begin to become conscious. They know who a boy is and who a girl is. So the child knows their gender identity regardless of their assigned identity at birth. Then we have gender roles that begin to condition the mind of, in this case, the boys and the girls, knowing how to treat each other very differently. And even at 3, the child can begin to know. Now that it is changing, it's changing now, but before they begin to know that blue is the color for boys and pink is the color for girls. Now it is changing in the name of political correctness, equality in relation to LGBTQ+. All right. So the gender, the role conditioning. Then there is the exploration of own, body in terms of hands, feet, tummy, and genitals between this age group. Then sometimes also you realize that they begin to enjoy nudity, then toileting training begins. And again, that is part of sexuality developing. Then curiosity about differences between bodies and curiosity about siblings and other parents. Any question? Is there any question? If there is no question, then we'll continue. Sorry. Then we have late childhood sexuality, which is from 4 to 8 years. So childhood sexual plays begin to form. Examples are there. Then we have gender role learning between boys and girls. It's also an awareness that is created. So they begin to learn words, sex words like bathroom vocabularies. It differs from culture to culture and sometimes from different ethnic backgrounds as well. They begin to ask questions about pregnancy and birth, how babies are made. I don't know if your children have ever asked you that question before. How are babies made? I know some children ask those questions to their mothers and their fathers. How are babies born? It is part of the development of sexuality between those ages. Then they also begin to distinguish acceptable and unacceptable behaviors. What is allowed, what is not allowed. Sometimes culture defines this for us. Other times religion defines that for us. And sometimes family values define these for us. And so in the home environment, the child knows what is accepted and what is not accepted. It is part of their development of sexuality along that age. Then there is also along this age, the possibility of masturbation and self-stimulation developing in the children. I know some of you might be surprised, but it happens. Then children may become more modest about their body Then they also begin to get media influences in relation to what they watch on TV, in relation to understanding about gender through society and family roles, and also messaging, what they see now much more on social media, which influences the children's understanding. All right. So parents need to be involved in regulating and controlling what their children watch. Parents need to do that on TV and also social media. Very important. Then from the age of 9 to 11 years, puberty, adolescence, puberty begins. So there is growth of the genitals, then breast development in girls, and the voice of the boys deepening, mood changes. They begin to, grow hair in their private parts, and etc. Then there is the menstruation or spermatozoa production, which may begin soon for some of the children, depending on how their bodies are developing. There is the possibility of masturbation also at this age as they begin to stimulate their sexual organs. There is closeness of same or similar gender identifying relationships. They begin to know what it means to have a boyfriend, girlfriend. Possibility of body exploration with others. They begin to become aware of the other children's bodies, especially across both sexes. And these things are some of the reasons why we're saying last week, on Monday, that it's important that parents find a way of wisely giving their children sex education, because what they learn from home will help them to know what the truth is from what they will learn from their friends. Their friends can teach them things that they don't learn from home, and they may end up being misled and being misguided. But when we develop the confidence of teaching them what the right thing is, instead of shying away with it, sometimes because of culture and religion, we think it's not acceptable in our culture. But then they already watch some of these things on TV and on social media and talk about it in school with their friends. So it's better we teach them what the right thing is and what the wrong thing is from home. What do you think? Any question? Let me take some questions and contributions and reactions before we continue. Yes. What do you think about what we've covered so far? Okay, I think you may be talking, but you are muted, so I cannot hear. Anyone wants to contribute or respond to what we've shared so far? So I think that means we understand and there are no questions. All right, so adolescence sexuality. So much more between the ages of 12 and 18. So puberty changes, physical and emotional, continue to happen. Then menstruation and spermatozoa production also begins much more. Then again, the possibility of masturbation. And at this age, they take much more pleasure from touching and from kissing, because these are some of the things they also watch on TV and also watch on social media and see from people. Then there is a greater awareness of their own sexual identity and the sexual identity of other people around them, knowing much more about males and females, possibility of getting involved in sexual activity, sometimes accidentally, or sometimes by being influenced by their friends, or sometimes just trying to practice what they see on TV or social media. Then there's a possibility of pregnancy if sexual activity develops in pregnancy. Then there's also, and that's why sometimes you see a lot of underage pregnancy, unplanned, where the children are not married and different things happen. Then there's a possibility of need for contraception or sex safety decisions. And so you see that sometimes they learn these things from their friends or they learn it from school, and so they begin to practice it. Okay. Then we have youth sexuality between the ages of 19 and 30. So it's considered that these are the ages of maturity to some extent, and accountability and responsibility, because it's expected that you know what you're doing. So at this age, between these age ranges, there is a possibility of sexual activity with partner, because at this age, some people get married. Possibility of masturbation as well. Decision-making about partnerships. So people begin to think of who their partner is, marriage partner is, getting into marriage, starting their family life, and having their career. It all starts at this age. Exploration of sexuality. Possibility of pregnancy, most of the time at this age, in marriage. Childbirth and parenting starts at this age as well in some cultures, for times and where people have early marriage. There's also the possibility of contraception use and also safe sex decisions. Possibility of ending a relationship and starting another relationship. Possibility of entering into formal relationships. All right. Then we have the adult sexuality, which is between the ages of 31 and 45. 31 and 45. So the possibility of partner selection, much more because of expectations. Maintaining of relationships, so marriages and sexual relationships and non-sexual relationships, friendships forming. Possibility of masturbation. Possibility of parenting responsibilities, sex education of own children. This is the key, and this is what we're talking about. It is very important that at this age, you don't leave sex education to your children's schools, our children's schools, and what they watch on TV. We take responsibility to begin to give them sex education, teach them the right things, teach them what they should avoid, teach them the consequences of things and other things that will help them, so they don't make some mistakes. Then there is also the possibility of pregnancy and childbearing, especially in marriage relationships and partnerships. Decision-making about the use of contraception, especially where birth control comes into the picture, and sex safety decisions to avoid sexually transmitted diseases. Possibility of grandparenting. So at this age, some parents will have their children who are giving birth and they become grandparents, and they begin to enjoy the responsibility of looking after their grandparents, and then the possibility of ending a relationship, So this age is an interesting age. Then we move to the ages of 46 and 64. It just stands, 46 and 64. It's a very interesting age. So at this age, there is what we call menopause in women, and then andropause in men. Andropause is a syndrome which is associated with a reduction in sexual satisfaction, or a decline in a feeling of general well-being with a low level of testosterone in older women. So there is a reduction in sexual activity. Most of the time we don't hear this. We only hear about menopause, but then that is in women, but in men we call it andropause. All right, a decline, a reduction in sexual satisfaction. So people need to understand this if their partners or spouses are around these ages, and so in order to understand how they feel in their body and not to put too much pressure on them. At this age, there is the possibility of grandparenting, and so much more energy and time is spent, taking care of their grandchildren because of the reduction in sexual satisfaction. So the energy is used to do other things. Possibility of sexual activity in those who have a lot more energy. Possibility of partner selection again. Possibility of masturbation. Possibility of the use of contraception and safe sex decisions. Possibility of divorce and death of a partner or a spouse, it happens mostly within this age range. And all of these affect the sexuality and the sexual health of the individuals. And in this case, adults in care. Any question? Do we have any question or any contribution? Getting to the end of the lifespan. Right, if there are no questions, I think these are straightforward. So from 65 years onwards, the body responds sexually, but more slowly. So there is a generally slow response to sexual activity. It doesn't mean sexual activity is gone, sexual urge is gone. No, it's still there, but it begins to slow down, not like that heightened, passionate level. Then there's possibility of grandparenting, energy is spent there as well. The need for physical affection is here, much more need for physical affection. Possibility of masturbation, possibility of sexual activity, it's still possible. Possibility of sex safety decisions, still possible. Possibility of other health issues affecting sexual activity. Much of what we talked about last week happens here. Okay, because of aging and decline of body functions. So impairment, visual impairment, hearing impairment, body becoming weak, frail, arthritis, dementia, all of those things coming in. So it begins to affect sexual activity in different ways. Then at this age also, there's a possibility of partner dying or spouse dying, and that also comes with its own attended problems and consequences, go into grief, sorrowing, which affects other, functions of the body and different things. And then also, it is also the age where some people also consider remarriage after the death of a partner. What we've covered so far, these are the references. If there is no question, I'm going to continue with the rest. Summary of much of what we talked about on Monday and today is that older adults have continuing sexual need. The fact that they are old or getting old doesn't mean the sexual urge is no longer there or they don't feel it. No, they feel it. It is still there. And the interest persists in their lives throughout the rest of their time, life. Then there are barriers and challenges to their sexual health, especially as they age. Some of the barriers include normal aging changes, like what I've said earlier on. Once the body begins to decline, different things also decline. Then there is disease processes. So there are sicknesses, they begin to take treatment, medical treatment upon treatment, and the medical treatment, some of them also have their own adverse effects, health issues, tell on the mind, emotions, also affect sometimes psychologically and physically. And so all of these drain the body. And so the interest and the passion that would have gone into sexual activity reduces gradually. And then medication and the environment as well. So these things, most of the time, we don't think about it, but with life and with time, they just develop. We don't have control over some of them. And that is why we have to take care of our lives and make the most of our time and maximize our potentials and efforts when we are able to. Now, it's also necessary. We also found out that it's necessary to conduct a sexual health assessment on all adults that are coming into care and develop, care plans for them, which considers and manages their sexual health needs. We shouldn't just assume that because they are old, they are not experiencing their sexuality or they don't have sexual needs. That is a myth, and that is a wrong perception. They have sexual needs. It is very important. These are other sources for that. But then we're going to continue and look at other areas that we need to cover. So I'm going to go to my next slide. Any question on what we have covered so far? I think we have a few minutes about 17 minutes or so, or about 12 minutes. Let's look at other aspects of, okay, so let's look at approaches. Okay, let's look at national and local interventions, and then we'll also look at specialist services. All right, let me ask a question before we go into some of these interventions. Let me ask a question. What do you think are some of the national and local approaches that are used by the government and also at the local levels to promote sexual health? Anybody? National approaches or strategies or local interventions to promote sexual health? Anybody wants to share? Okay. There's a case study I want to share with us, but I will do that after we've looked at it. We may not have all the time to do it in the end today. I would need you to read that. Okay, so this I didn't prepare. I found it out of research and I find it's helpful and useful. So, right, so here we are not focusing on young people. When we're talking about approaches to promote sexual health and sexuality, we are talking generally, in general terms, because we grow from our childhood into our youth and then into our adulthood and become elderly people. And so that starts from there to now. Look on this and what pictures can you see? What does that suggest to you? Yes, I need some responses. What pictures can you see? What can you see? What does that suggest to you? Alita, Naina, Sarah, anybody? Please, you can unmute yourself and tell us what you think.
Yeah, let's talk about young people's sexual health. That one.
Okay. Yes, talking about young people's sexual health.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, so what do you think this suggests?
No, teen talk is like peer pressure, I think.
Okay, teen talk is like what?
Peer pressure.
Peer pressure. Okay, good. Yes. So what do they think about themselves and share with each other?
Yeah. STIs is a sexual transmission
infection
from disease. Yeah.
The STI, sexually transmitted infections.
Yeah, infection.
Yes. Thank you. Well done, Sarah. Any other? So contraception, we know that there are different types of contraceptions or contraceptives. Who can tell us about contraceptives? Which ones are you aware of, or which ones are there? And that's all part of promotion of sexual health. All right, Naina. Naina, can you hear me, please? Okay, Lalita, any idea? Where are our sisters?
Yes, sorry, Chris, you were calling me.
Yes, I was calling you. I was asking if you had anything to say about any of these things. Sarah has talked about this and this. What does any of this suggest to you?
Has Sarah talked about contraceptions?
She talked about teen talk and STIs.
Okay, so you want like what my views on contraceptions for
Not
teens?
any of these. What does that suggest to you? We are talking about how to promote sexual health nationally and locally. So that's any of
in youngsters, right?
Yes, generally.
Like if we talk about contraception, so in many countries in like Europe and the US, where there is much awareness about sex and its outcomes,
Yes.
People do have the condom vending machines in different outlets and even in the washrooms.
Okay, good. Very good. So that's a very good information.
So, and at the very young age in the schools also, I think it is there in most part of the Europe, but although it's like it's like a kiosk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in Europe and like even in London as well, kids have started being taught about the you can say the male and female parts at a very young age, so that to kill their curiosity, basically to curb their curiosity.
That's right.
Because see, it's a very human nature. It's like basic human nature that you want to know more about something which you're not being told.
That's it. Because of culture, isn't it? And sometimes religion.
So, like but in other parts of the world, like in eastern parts of the world, in countries like Asia, Asian countries like India, Pakistan, and all that, there is not much awareness and there is not much acceptance of these things being taught to the children or teens at a very young age.
Yeah.
Even the parents hesitate to tell them or educate them properly.
That's right. But then it's like you rightly pointed out. That's what I was saying earlier on. It's very important as parents we start teaching our children early. So when they get the right information from home, they will not be misled by their friends outside or what they share with them in school, and they want to try it because mom didn't teach them, dad didn't teach them, so they think it's not a very important thing. And so once they hear it from school, they think what they are hearing from their friends is the right thing, and they want to try it. So it's also helpful that we know when and how to communicate with our children. Thank you very much, Nina, for sharing. So that is part of what we call promotion of.
So are there any health initiatives in UK schools and government bodies also where the children are being taught about all these things at a young age?
Yes, there are. There are. It was in the news, I think 2-3 months ago, that they said they are going to start teaching the children, or they started teaching them earlier on anyway, even from primary school, about transgender, gayism, lesbianism, other things. And they have diffused the notion that blue is the color for boys and pink is the color for girls, because some people don't identify as boys nor girls. So these have already started, and that is part of national initiatives and approaches. They are teaching them about sex and sexuality in schools. So thank you, Nina, for that helpful contribution. And Sarah, the sexual health information in schools and clinics. So they are happening in schools and clinics. So these are part of the national initiatives and also local approaches, okay, and interventions. So we are talking about two different things at the same time: national and local initiatives or approaches and interventions. So the quality of school sex and relationship education, called SRE, in the UK varies and it differs from school to school, area to area, but it is happening. So they are teaching them sex, relationship education. A full program of sex relationship education is not compulsory in UK schools. It's not compulsory. Not all schools have good access to digital technology, computers, and the internet, but most have. Now you're thinking about the village, or not the villages, the remote areas anyway. So it can be hard for young people to access clinics because of distance, opening times, and also sometimes they feel that they are not welcome. Asking for help with sexual health problems can be difficult sometimes for young people, like we are talking about. Young people would like to get sexual health information and advice from adults, including their parents, teachers, and clinic staff, but they also want to access it online because they easily have information there. They don't have to ask anybody, they're just going to click and see. And young people also want sexual health education, which includes pleasure and relationships, not just biology, but safer sex and pregnancy education. So because they are curious, there are some facts about young people and sexual reproductive health. Sarah, can you take us through this very quickly for the next 2 minutes? Is that okay? Which ends our time.
Yeah, this one. No? Some facts about young people and sexual and reproductive health. I can read it. Teenagers are far less likely to get pregnant today than they were in the early 1970s. The conception rate is 1970 was 82.4% in 15 to 19 years, compared with 44.2 in 2012. There is often a wide gap between good intention and actual behavior. While most young people do use condoms when they first have sex, there are many reasons why others don't. These range from not feeling able to negotiate the use of condoms or contraceptions to peer pressure, alcohol, and being caught up in the moment.
Yeah.
After drinking alcohol, 1 in 7 16 to 24-year-olds have had unprotected sex. 1 in 5 have had sex that they later regretted, and 1 in 10 have been unable to remember if they had sex the night before because they were too drunk.
Yeah. So these are some of the facts, and I'm going to require you, when you get a PowerPoint, to read more on these things. Some of the interventions and local initiatives are the production of, most of these equipment for at different places that they can easily access and use. And I will need you to read this and use this helpful information, which you can use to substitute your own research to answer the questions as well. Yeah. Thank you for being here today. It's been wonderful having you. And we thank Raj also for moderating the session for us. And
thank you, Chris.
Yes, you're welcome. I'll see you on Monday. Monday, we're starting a new unit. You will get these resources from Nancy.
Chris.
Yep.
Hi, Chris.
Yes.
Yeah, Chris, just wanted to ask you before we go that if we submit you the assignment, I'm talking about myself, if I submit to you the assignment within a week, so is it possible for you, I know you are busy, but is it possible for you to give at least the feedback for the first assignment so that we know that we are going on the right track? Because till now I haven't submitted any of the assignments and I'm still a bit scared for the referencing part.
Yeah, even for the same thing happened for me also.
Yeah, I'm happy to look at it, but send it through Nancy. I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah, that's not an issue. So I'll be happy if you can send the feedback for at least the first one so that we can move ahead with the other assignments.
Yeah, that's fine. So I think your assignment is submitted. Thank you, Nina. It's submitted to Nancy, isn't it? So
no, it's not submitted yet. I'm asking if I'll submit to you, so you'll be able to give the feedback within a week.
I will be happy to do it, but it's all regulated by Nancy. So when you send to Nancy, just request Nancy, I would like to have a feedback, and then she will refer to me, and then it will be done between the two of us.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, even though it's not a hardcore final feedback, even if you just give me the helicopter view that okay, so it's fine, and so thing you need to do the correction and all, then also it's fine.
Perfect. Yeah, understand it. Yeah.
So within a week, I'll submit you at least 1 or 2 assignments so you can have a look.
That will be fine, Nina. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Alita.
Thank you,
Raj. Okay. Take care. See you next week.
Okay, bye.
Bye.